The Sergeant at Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, we are very pleased today to have the Reverend Dr. Gerald Folsom of Greater Mount Nebo AME Church in Bowie, Maryland, guest of the Distinguished Senator from the 25th District, however, resident of the Distinguished Senator from the 23rd District. Please rise for the invocation.
Let us pray. We are humbled and blessed to come before you, O God, thanking you first of all for your grace and mercy. God, as we have moved through all of life's challenges this year, we recognize and give thanks that it was you who kept us safe through life's storms. We recognize and give thanks that it was you who watched over us when trouble was lurking around the corner. We recognize and give thanks that it is you who continues to be our guide. Bless our leadership at all levels of government. In this great state of Maryland, God bless our governor and his administration. In this great state of Maryland, God bless this most esteemed legislative body, our Maryland State Senate. All across our state, bless our citizens from the youngest to the most seasoned citizens. Provide the resources, God, and the wisdom for our state to continue to improve our infrastructure, including the rebuilding of the Key Bridge, where, dear Father, we take a pause this morning and ask you to bless the families of those affected. Provide us the resources and wisdom in education systems, economic stimulus, climate change, and yes, even bond bills. May we keep our citizens safe and promote more safe partnerships between our juvenile services, between our state's attorneys, and our law enforcement. Let us always care for the least, the locked out, and the left out in our communities. God, we thank you and allow us to collectively continue to chart our course together and find common ground on a pathway to greatness. You, O God, have been good to our state. Now guide this great state of Maryland to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with you, O God. Amen.
All right, recognize the Senator from the 25th District.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President and Senate colleagues. Today, I'm greatly honored to welcome Reverend Dr. Gerald Folsom from the Greater Mount Nebo African Methodist Episcopal Church in Bowie, Maryland, to the Senate floor of Annapolis, not for his first time, but welcome him again. Dr. Folsom is originally from Quinham, Georgia, but was led to the DMV area by his passion of learning. He holds a PhD in communication and culture from Howard University in Washington, D.C., a Master of Divinity from Howard University, and an MA in Organizational Communication from Bowie State University in Bowie, Maryland, and a BS in Liberal Arts from Excelsior College in Albany, New York. He served as the Prince George's County's faith-based liaison and was recently appointed by our current county executive, Angela Also Brooks. He is also my fraternity brother and life member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. A few weeks ago, I was afforded the opportunity to fellowship with Reverend Folsom and his wife Joyce Folsom and his flock in Bowie, where their mission is to make disciples for Jesus Christ and to serve the world. He just recently moved over to this church, but he was currently, well, before that was in Hemingway in District 25 for my good colleague in District 23. So, Mr. President, please join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Gerald Folsom, and please journalize his comments. Thank you, sir.
Without objection, we'll certainly journalize the invocation. Thank the Reverend for his work. Thank you. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is again in session. Do we have any guests or introductions today? Guests or introductions? Not at all. All right. Everybody wants to get to work. We're only a little bit late today. We're going to try and get through as much as we can. As senators can see, we've got piles on piles on piles. So We'll do the best that we can. We're going to go ahead and waive the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. And let's go ahead and start with message from the House. This is first reading of House bills, calendar 30. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 656, Delegate Ivy, Family Law, Victims of Domestic Violence Program, Certification and Grant Fund, Rules.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They'll be referred to the Rules Committee. We have a report from the Committee on Finance. Clerk will read the first. This is calendar number 20. Consent calendar, apparently. Clerk will read the calendar.
Finance Report number 51, Consent Calendar number 20.
Let's recognize the chair of the committee. The report out of Finance. This is consent calendar number 20.
Mr. President, can we wait? I can't find it on my desk.
All right, let's go ahead. We'll just hold it for a moment and bring it back when we have. Let's see. Hold on one second. Let's go to Education, Energy, and the Environment. We have report number 48. Report number 48. These are Senate bills. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 492, Senator Kagan, Public Schools, Student Telehealth Appointments, Policy and Access, favorable of 2 amendments.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee.
Good morning, Mr. President. Senate Bill 492 will just allow our students to continue to get the telehealth program and access to health care that we allowed during COVID. There are enormous waits, 2, 3, 4, 6 months to get an appointment during after school hours. And so this would enable them to have quick appointments in the school building. The MSDE is going to confer with all the stakeholders, come up with a system with some guidelines. The 24 counties would end up coming up with a plan from there that would be implemented. It doesn't change anything except where and when. There are 2 amendments. The first one is technical, and the second one just makes clear that the Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland Department of Health are going to be having this, these collaborations and issuing the deadlines. So I move the favorable adoption of the 2 amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without, oh yes, the chair recognizes the minority whip on the amendments.
Just to add one question for the floor
Will
leader,
the floor
if I
leader
might.
yield? Senator may proceed.
Of course.
This is dealing with schools, so what are these appointments? Because we're not talking about primary care appointments, right? Or this is something that is a school-based services?
So the bill that we passed a few years ago was for primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care. So this is just allowing them. Currently, there's an inequity because you have to leave the school building. So you have to have a parent or guardian who's not at work. They have to come and pick up the student, take them either to a private place or to a doctor's appointment. The student misses a bunch of school. And if they do it in, let's say, the parent or guardian's vehicle, then there's no confidentiality for, let's say, a behavioral health appointment. So this indicates it can't be a bathroom, it can't be a closet, but schools should figure out a place where there is Wi-Fi access, a horizontal surface to put a laptop and stuff, so that people can have a quick appointment with a medical provider.
But, okay, so what you just, so is there, the last thing that you said about privacy in a parent's vehicle, these would all be appointments. A student can't consent to a medical appointment without parental consent unless they're at least 16 or 17, right?
So that's not true. Actually, we passed a bill, I believe it was 2021, by the gentleman by the senator from District 47, if I remember correctly, that said that mental health appointments, behavioral health appointments can be done without consent from age 12 and up. It's important, and our students are struggling.
Well, I definitely know there's an issue with students struggling, and I do remember that bill very vividly. But does this just cover mental and behavioral health, or does this cover all kinds of other appointments?
No, mental health, primary care, and dental care, the same as the bill we passed before. The only thing that changes is the location in the school building and the time of day. So it can be during the school hours, which is easier for students to get an appointment.
Understood. So, but for primary care and dental care, you still need parental consent, correct?
Depends on what it is.
Okay, I'm just curious how the bill speaks to how does a parent know their student is engaging in a medical practice, in a medical appointment.
Hold on 2 seconds. I have all that. So the amendments, first off, the most important thing is that this bill doesn't take effect in the schools until the 25-26 school year.
So there's time to work through
So there
some
is
of these
time. The MSDE is going to be working with the Department of Health and others to craft guidelines that then the 24 jurisdictions would work on implementing.
But does the bill speak to, so the part of the guidelines, does the bill speak to whether there have been guidelines established to ensure that responsible, because this deals with not just high schools, this is elementary and
No,
middle.
it's middle and high school.
It's middle and high, okay.
Yeah,
But
that's a great
does
question.
does the bill speak, though, to whether a guardian or parent will be aware of
It doesn't change anything in current law about that.
okay, so if there's an appointment that you already have to have parental involvement and consent
Then
for,
that
it doesn't
won't
change
change.
that. Okay, okay. All right, thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. All right, on the two amendments, any further discussion? If not, let's see, any objections to the two committee amendments? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 492 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 653, Senator Augustine, Standing Environment and Natural Resources Protection Proceeding, Clean Water Justice Act of 2024, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Clean Water Act is federal law that has been extremely effective in helping us to clean up our waterways. If you may recall, we used to have waterways that literally would catch on fire. We've had tremendous improvement in our waterways and where they are. Now, one of the key elements of that is a citizen suit. And that extended the oversight of our waters that would allow for folks all over the country to see these issues, these concerns with waterways, and be able to sue to make sure that people who are polluting our waterways are held accountable. Now, last summer, the Supreme Court, in a case, changed the definition of the waters of the United States, removing streams that don't always have water in them, wetlands, from our definition of the waterways of the United States, thereby removing this oversight that we had. And so what this bill does is it looks at that very narrow place where the change of definition for the waterways of the United States and puts it and reinstates that right to citizen suits in our state law. As amended, the bill states that a person that meets the threshold standing requirements under federal law has standing in civil claims arising under any requirements, prohibitions, limitations, or condition established by statute, regulation, permit, order, or license issued by the Secretary in accordance with certain subtitles of the environmental article, which it really looks at most closely ephemeral streams and intermittent streams. That's kind of like the definition of it. A person that has standing under the bill may bring a civil action on the person's own behalf against any person or political subdivision that is alleged to be in violation of any standard. A person may not bring an action if the Secretary has commenced and is diligently prosecuting, and that's the Secretary of the Environment, is prosecuting a civil action or a consent order is entered to require compliance. There are two amendments. The first is technical and adds co-sponsors. The second clarifies and narrows the application of the bill to allow citizens to file civil enforcement actions in state court. The amendments define certain terms and also clarifies the right of individuals who meet the threshold standing requirements under federal law to intervene in certain civil actions. I move the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
All right, the floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district on the report.
Just a quick question for the floor leader.
Will the floor leader, senator may proceed.
Yeah. So how would this impact, and how are individuals who are operating under a state-issued permit, specifically MDE permits for CAFOs, would they be excluded from this because they're already being regulated?
They are actually a part of the bill, and so that making sure that they are complying with their permits, this would extend to that. So as long as they're complying with the permit, they're not polluting excessively, then they would be fine. Now, but if they are polluting, and it is found by a citizen, they are actually able to sue. With that being said, as is stated in the bill, we really will depend on the Department of the Environment for the primary enforcement of it. This is another layer of protection for our waterways.
So so they're already operating under MDE permit. They're being regulated. This would open up a new area of enforcement, I guess, from citizens or in public interest stakeholders. And then if suits are brought against the private citizens and they're to win, where do the attorney's fees go? Do they have to? Do they get their attorney's fees awarded if someone brings a suit against them? And
The bill is silent on attorney's fees, and it would follow the way they are right now. This bill does not address attorney's fees.
Okay. And as far as, so that was one question I had. Another question I had is as far as the definition of water. So standing water, would that be covered?
Standing water is not, it would not. I mean, this deals with ephemeral streams. So those are streams that don't always have water in them. There are clear definitions of what that would be. And or those basically like wetlands would also become a part of that. So if it's a place where that would intermittently, there are waters that do become inundated with water, it would apply in that instance.
Yeah, and I'll go back and read the bill, though. I appreciate it. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
All right, on the report, further discussion, Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask the bill floor leader a couple of
Will
questions?
the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
So this is the first I've been aware of this bill. I'm taking a look at the testimony online, and it appears that the Maryland Chamber, the Maryland Municipal League, NAOP, MACO, the Maryland Realtors, the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, the Maryland Building Industrial Association, the Maryland Farm Bureau, the National Federation of Independent Business, all came out against this bill. Were amendments made to this bill to try to deal with their objections, and were they successful?
Yes, they were, Senator. I can speak to NAOP, MBIA, MACO. We did reach out to, but did not hear back from Farm Bureau. They all became neutral on the bill because we made it far more narrow. And really, Senator, we put it in the posture, basically, that we were in 12 months ago. So the Supreme Court made this change last summer. So 12 months ago, these waters that we've now very narrowly put back into our state law were under the federal jurisdiction of civil suits. We made sure that it was very narrow. As it originally came in, it wasn't as narrow. I will share with you that. But by way of amendment, we narrowed it way down, and I think it did relieve a significant amount of the objections to the bill.
Okay, thank you.
All right, question is on the amended report. Any further discussion? If not, any objections to the report? Without objection, the report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 653 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1024, Senator Brooks, Public Schools Cardiac Emergency Action Plan Requirements, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 35th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill requires each public middle and high school to include a cardiac emergency response plan, or a CERP, that includes specified items as a component of its venue-specific emergency action plan for athletic facilities. The plan must be annually reviewed and updated by each middle and high school. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment 1 is technical, and the second amendment makes establishment of cardiac emergency response plan a component of venue-specific emergency action plan for each athletic facility at each public middle and high school. I'd like to move the 2 committee amendments and ask for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1024 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1141, Senator Lewis Young, Community Colleges, Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Requirements, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This bill expands the eligibility for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program. It is very much aligned with the blueprint pillar of career and college readiness. So the particular groups that it would expand this scholarship opportunity to are those who are enrolled in a non-credit vocational certificate program, those who are enrolled in a sequence of non-credit courses leading to licensure or certification, and finally, those who are registered in an apprenticeship program. There are 2 committee amendments to conform to the House bill. One is technical. The other actually strikes provisions that would be barriers to these 3 audiences. There is no additional spending. The bill was passed unanimously in committee. Therefore, I move for adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1141 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's go to report number 49. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 17, Chair, Environment and Transportation Committee, Charter Counties Comprehensive Plans, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, favorable.
Recognizing the Vice Chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill is identical to Senate Bill 274, which passed this body on February 6th. There are no committee amendments, so move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 17 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 225, Chair, Environmental and Transportation Committee, Sustainable Growth Subcabinet, repeal of the Office of Smart Growth, favorable.
Recognize Senator from Frederick City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a departmental bill, and it's identical to Senate Bill 309 as passed by the Senate. It reorganizes and modifies provisions governing the Office of Smart Growth and the Smart Growth Subcabinet. It includes repealing the Office of Smart Growth and transferring its powers and duties to the renamed Sustainable Growth Subcabinet. This passed unanimously in committee. There are no amendments. I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 225 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 501, Delegate Fennell, Charter Counties Enforcement of Local Laws, favorable.
Recognizing the Senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is identical to the cross-file Senate Bill 522. As it passed the Senate, it increases from $1,000 to $5,000 the maximum civil and criminal fines that may be imposed by a charter county. There are no committee amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 501 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 522, Delegate D. Jones, Public Schools, Student Telehealth Appointments, Policy and Access, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing Vice Chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are the same two amendments that we just passed on the Senate bill just a few minutes ago. Move the adoption of the favorable committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 522 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 607, Delegate Harris, Community Colleges, Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Requirements, favorable.
Recognizing Senator from District 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is identical to the bill I shared a few minutes ago, SB 1141, and it is the bill that would expand the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship to students pursuing careers in vocational and technology endeavors. Thank you. Oh, I move for a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 607 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 680, Delegate T. Morgan, Environment, Nuclear Power Plants, Emergency Preparedness, Radiation Emergency Preparedness and Protection Act, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 23rd as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill is identical to Senate Bill 536, which passed this body. The bill establishes the Radiation Emergency Response Program in the Maryland Department of Environment. Bill establishes two annual fees, $300,000 for operational cost of the program and $60,000 fee for radiological emergency response preparedness that must be paid by the owner of the nuclear power plant. There are no committee amendments. I move favorable the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 680 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1101, Delegate Love, Standing Environmental and Natural Resources Protection Proceedings, Clean Water Justice Act of 2024, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing President Pro Tem as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1101 is in the same posture as Senate Bill 653, which we just heard, that establishes citizen standing in certain suits as it pertains to ephemeral streams and intermittent streams. There's one committee amendment. The amendment makes a number of technical changes, clarifies that a persons who meet federal standing requirements can intervene in any civil action the department files to enforce Title V, Subtitle 9, or Title 9, Subtitle 3. I move the committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1101 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1219, Delegate Feldmark, Public and Non-Public Middle School and High School Venue-Specific Emergency Action Plan for Athletic Facilities, Bailey-Bullock Act, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 35th.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill is identical to Senate Bill 1024 that we heard on the previous calendar. There are two committee amendments. The first one is technical. The second amendment strikes the provisions related to non-public schools. I'd like to move the two committee amendments and ask for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1219 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Let's do this quick rules report so we can get this one over. This is report number 7 out of the Committee on Rules. Clerk, read the bill.
Rules Report Number 7, House Bill 538, the Speaker, Land Use, Affordable Housing, Zoning Density, and Permitting, Housing Expansion Affordability Act of 2024, re-referred to EEE.
All right, recognizing the rules chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that that House Bill 538 be re-referred to its appropriate committee.
Without objection, the bill will be referred to the appropriate standing committee. All right, let's go back to Education, Energy, and the Environment. Report number 50. Clerk will read the report.
Education, Energy, and Environment Report Number 50, Consent Calendar Number 21.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Yeah, it's just a consent calendar. Most of these bills passed. These are exact cross files of Senate bills that we previously passed, I believe on a unanimous basis.
All right. The chair moves that we adopt the favorable committee report for House bills and consent calendar 21. Senators, please take a look at the bills. Are there any bills that senators wish to take up independently? Any bills? If not, any objection to the favorable report? Without objection, the favorable committee reports for House bills on consent calendar 21 are adopted, and the bills are ordered passed for third reading. Let's go to calendar report number 51. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 783, Senator Elfrith, Renewable Energy, Net Energy Metering, Aggregation, Solar Renewable Energy Credits and Taxes on Solar Energy Generating Systems, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. A little background I think is important for this piece of legislation, Senate Bill 783. In 2019, in the Clean Energy Jobs Act, Mr. President, we established a 50% requirement for how much of our energy would come from renewable energy sources, and a separate goal of 14.5% to come from state solar source, in-state solar sources. Important for environmental goals and obviously a big job creator. Unfortunately, the last several years have been very difficult challenging for the solar industry nationally and in Maryland due to the pandemic, rising inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, and other unforeseen factors. And so it's essentially a crisis, and the structure of our RPS, or Renewable Portfolio Standard, in its current form, needs some major revisions. Modernization is exacerbating matters because the economics of solar are actually going to become more challenging starting next year. And so if we keep at the current pace, we're not going to get anywhere near that 14.5% solar carve-out number by 2030. We'll maybe get to half. And so the genesis of this bill was last year we passed a task force, created a task force. The sponsor was a senator from District 30 to come up with recommendations regarding policy changes needed to jumpstart our solar industry to get to those goals, or at least get closer to those goals, given all the headwinds facing the industry. A lot of work went into this task force, a set of recommendations. There was a lot of collaboration this session with the House of Delegates, with the PSC, and a number of players. So this is a 3-year bridge piece of legislation. This is not a permanent fix. And essentially, when it comes to solar, we need to start working on a more permanent fixed renewable portfolio standard. It only applies to projects that begin generating electricity before January 1, 2028. It's narrowed down from its as introduced, much more modest, very targeted, Mr. President, to those portions of the solar industry where incentives can make a difference in changing behavior, incentivizing new projects, helping projects that are harder to finance, harder to pencil out, and not rewarding projects that have already been built or developed, or that we think are likely to pencil out without any policy changes. We're talking smaller projects, ones that are, again, harder to finance, specifically rooftop sites, parking canopies, brownfields. These preferred sites can come online quick. The infrastructure already exists. Again, Mr. President, it's been pared down in a lot of different ways. There were issues raised by the minority leader in MACO. I'll just give the minority leader some credit. Those portions of the bill were removed. Extremely mindful of ratepayer impact. There were proposals to make changes that would have put upward pressure on ratepayers, but the committee, working with the sponsor, rejected those ideas. At all times, the committee sponsor worked with the Public Service Commission, PJM, to figure out what's technically feasible and coming up with a concrete set of solutions, which again are a short-term bridge to a more permanent solution. So, Mr. President, just very quickly, to component parts, there are some tax incentives here that MACO and MML were part of crafting. Number one, we had an exemption that was created in 2022 for low, moderate income folks in terms of a personal property tax exemption. That sunsetted in 2025. That's being extended for some years. There's some property tax incentives. There's some enabling legislation allowing locals on top of that to do some relief at the local level where appropriate. Again, all these tax components were negotiated with MACO. And then finally, Mr. President, there's something called a solar renewable energy enhanced or bonus SREC that again will begin starting January 1, 2025, ending January 1, 2028. Again, this is a bridge to a longer term solution. Again, we're talking commercial residential rooftops, parking canopies, and brownfields. And with all that said, Mr. President, also the timing is good here. We have the Inflation Reduction Act kicked in. There's a lot of federal money. We don't want to leave any federal money on the table, and that this piece of legislation allows us to access some of that. So there were 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 delays the increase to the aggregate net energy metering cap to July 1st, 2025. It authorizes the Small Solar Energy Generating System Incentive Program to issue certified enhanced SRECs subject to additional specification. Eligible systems participating in the program may have a capacity of 5 megawatts or less instead of 2 megawatts or less. The amendments also raise the maximum capacity for all systems under the program. As amended, the life of a REC is extended from 3 to 5 years, and certified systems remain eligible for REC compliance for 15 years total. The maximum capacity of a solar facility eligible for tax exemption is raised, and the payment in lieu provisions at the local level are removed. Finally, up to 10% of the solar alternative compliance payment funds must be transferred to administer the fund. And with all that said, Mr. President, I think this is an important piece of legislation for our solar industry, and I would move the adoption of the committee, the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. And I just want to commend the senator from the 30th District, the capital city, for a tremendous amount of work she put in during the interim and even into the session. So, and I should also add the bill passed unanimously out of the EEE committee.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 783 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Are we ready for finance? If we have the we had the consent calendar. If we could, Madam Clerk, number 20. If we could read the calendar, the report.
Finance report number 51, consent calendar number 20.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The House bills on this report have no amendments and are the same as the cross-filed Senate bills that unanimously passed the Senate. I move the bills on this report.
All right, the chair moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report on House bills on consent calendar number 20. Any senators wish to separate out any of the bills? If not, any objections to the reports? Without objection, the favorable committee reports for House bills on consent 20 are adopted, and the bills are ordered passed for 3rd reading. Oops. Oh, there's finance. All right, let's move to report number 50 out of finance, 5-0. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 76, Senator Lamb, Continuing Care Requirement Committees, Governing Bodies, Grievances, and Entrance Fees, favorable with 4 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 76, as amended, requires providers to post the most recent disclosure statement on their website, hold a meeting open to all of the provider subscribers at least quarterly, and provide a de-identified summary of internal grievances at the last quarterly meeting of the year, as well as provide information to a subscriber or the subscriber's beneficiary regarding entrance fees refunds if the refund is conditioned on the reoccupancy of the subscriber's unit. In addition, the Maryland Department of Aging must collect internal grievance information from providers and report the information to the General Assembly. The bill is prospective and may not be applied or interpreted to have any effect on the application to any cause or action arising before the effective date of the Act. There are 4 amendments rather. The amendments 1 and 2 are technical, alter the title, and require disclosure statement postings, quarterly meetings, and the last annual quarterly meeting to include a specified summary. Amendments 3 and 4 retain current law for governing body membership, and terminated continuing care agreements and entrance fee refunds require the governing body to make specified determinations, specifies reporting requirements, and makes a specified written report. I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 76 is hereby ordered, printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 167, Senator Carrozza, Physician's Assistants Revisions, Physician Assistant Modernization Act of 2024, favorable with 4 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor, or excuse me, the committee chair is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is really the result of 3 years of hard work from our sponsor as well as the physician assistants and our physicians. So it modernizes the Physician Assistant Act, including that a collaboration agreement will be a delegation agreement with a delegation rather than a physician, a single physician, authorizes a PA who has notified the State Board of Physicians of a collaboration agreement to practice medical acts authorized under a license issued by the board, and the PA's collaboration agreement. Among other provisions, a PA may perform additional duties within a PA scope of practice as specified. The bill also alters the education and examination requirements for licensure and makes other conforming changes. As you know, we've made a lot of effort to try to increase access to care, and this is one of the bills that will help with that. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 requires a physician assistant to provide notice to the Board of Physicians of a collaboration agreement rather than submitting the agreement to the board, authorizes a physician assistant to delegate medical duties under certain circumstances, and clarifies what medical acts a physician assistant may perform. Amendment number 3 specifies the circumstances under which a physician assistant is required to obtain board approval to perform advanced duties, establishes the board's authority to modify a collaboration agreement or the delegation of an advanced duty under the agreement, and establishes requirements for a patient care team physician to delegate certain prescribing and dispensing. Amendment 4 requires the board to review and update the list of advanced duties for physician's assistants with certain stakeholders by January 1, 2025. There's no physical impact. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 167 is hereby ordered, printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 408, Senator Klossmeyer, Public Health, Opioid Overdose Reversal Drug, Standing Orders, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 408 is identical to House Bill 411. The bill requires the Maryland Department of Health to submit a report to the Senate Finance Committee and the House Health and Government Operations Committee by December 1st each year from 2024 through 26. Current opioid overdose reversal drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and 2, whether the department has added each current FDA-approved opioid overdose reversal drug to a standing order, and if not, the reason why any such drug has not been added. Amendment number 1 alters the bill's title, purpose, paragraph, and function. Amendment number 2 strikes the bill as introduced and substitutes the study to be conducted by the department as desired, and there is no fiscal impact, and I move the amendments in the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 408 is hereby ordered, printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 591, Senator Lamb, Education, Public Libraries, Collective Bargaining, and Library Worker Empowerment Act, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognized Senator from District 12 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 591 grants collective bargaining rights to designated employees of public libraries in Maryland. The bill does not apply to libraries in Montgomery, Prince George's, and Baltimore counties because of existing collective bargaining laws. The bill establishes 2 bargaining units, one for employees and another for specified supervisory employees. The bill is similar to the law that granted collective bargaining rights for Baltimore County Library employees and includes elements of collective bargaining that applies to public employees in the state, including provisions for elections, designated exclusive representatives, employer rights, payment of dues, topics of bargaining, impasse, contents of agreements, and ratification of agreements. A county government is not bound by any item of agreement that requires an appropriation, and an employer is required to approve the findings of a mediator that do not require an appropriation in the event of an impasse. Strikes and lockouts are prohibited. The amendment is clarifying it strikes a requirement that binding arbitration includes appeals of disciplinary or adverse personnel actions. It authorizes that an agreement may include arbitration or disciplinary actions, and it increases the time for an employer to approve a mediator's findings. Move the adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the floor leader yield
Senator may proceed.
for questions?
Certainly.
Thank you, Senator. Could you tell us who will pay the administrative costs of administering this process?
The costs will be dealt with by each of the individual library systems, and the library systems will still be able to set their budget in accordance with processes that are already established and work with their local government to be able to do so.
And I think you mentioned early on that there are like 3 counties that this doesn't apply to because they're already doing something along these lines. So if that's the case, why does this need to be a statewide bill? Why, if you had a couple of larger counties that want to do it, they already could, like those 3 counties, couldn't they?
So 3 counties already have the ability to collectively bargain. There are actually more, but some have still in process of exercising that right. But I think there is a desire to have the ability for all library workers across the state to be able to collectively bargain and organize, and this creates a uniform standard so that it doesn't pit one local library system against another. It gives library workers the flexibility to work in whatever library system they choose with the same rights that all other library workers have.
Okay. Going back to administering the this process, was there a concern that this is going to be a big burden for some of our smaller libraries? I looked up earlier, for instance, Caroline County, this is FY22 numbers for reference. They only had 19 employees. Dorchester only has 14. Kent, 13. Only 16 in Somerset. So isn't there a concern that these smaller counties, this is going to put a extra burden on them as opposed to the larger counties who, as you mentioned, 3 are already doing this?
So during the hearing in the House, there were no small libraries that came to testify in opposition to this. We believe that workers at small libraries should also have the right to collectively bargain and form a union as well. And small counties still have the ability to set the budget as they see fit.
Well, you mentioned that none of the smaller libraries came in and testified in opposition, but do you think maybe that's because they have so few employees, they don't have time to send somebody down there to testify? But I noticed I guess what you could call more a mid-sized library, Hartford, did come in opposition to this.
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. So is there a thought maybe that you didn't have more opposition that actually came down because there's not that many employees that maybe have somebody come down here for a day? A mid-sized library like Hartford County Library did come out in opposition to this, which they're a little under 200 employees, I believe.
Well, the small libraries could still have submitted written testimony, and for these smaller systems, the employees could choose not to collectively bargain if that's their choice.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. President, I'd like to special order this until tomorrow. I have one amendment ready, but I'm looking at a couple other options.
The senator moves to special order the bill. Let's hear from the floor leader on the motion to special order till tomorrow.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. No objections. Without objection, the bill will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow. That was the last one on that calendar. Let's go to report number 52. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 189, Delegate R. Lewis, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Personal Care Aids, Wage Reports, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, House Bill 189 is identical to Senate Bill 371, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill requires each residential service agency to submit a report to the Department of Labor documenting the agency's average wage rate and highest and lowest wage rates for personal care aides. The Maryland Department of Health must submit a specified report on the ensuring access to a Medicaid final federal rule and the plans or steps that the department will take to operationalize the rule. Amendment 1 alters the effective date, aligning the bill with Senate Bill 371. There is no fiscal impact. Move the adoption of the single amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 189 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 251, Chair Economic Matters Committee, Unemployment Insurance Covered Employment, Employees of Governmental Entities or Charitable, Educational, or Religious Organizations. Favorable.
House Bill 251, recognizing the
Senator Kramer?
Senator from Montgomery County is recognized as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 251 is a departmental bill that specifies that the prohibition on the payment of unemployment insurance benefits to employees of governmental entities or charitable, educational, or religious organizations under certain circumstances does not apply to employees of for-profit companies, even if the for-profit company provides services exclusively for a governmental entity or a charitable, educational, religious, or other organization. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader, may report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 251 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 378, Delegate Gazone, State Board of Dietetic Practice Dietitian, Nutritionist, Application Requirements. Favorable.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 371 alters the requirements for licensure as a dietitian nutritionist from the State Board of Dietetic Practice. To qualify, an individual must, at a minimum, receive a baccalaureate degree from a college or university accredited by an educational accrediting association as required by the Commission on Dietetic Registration, instead of as recognized by the Council on Higher Education Accreditation. The bill also updates the name of the certification board for nutritional specialists to be the Board for Certification of Nutrition Specialists, and the name of the American College of Nutrition to be the American Nutrition Association. There are no amendments, no physical impact. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 378 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 411, Delegate Kipke, Maryland Department of Health, reports on standing orders and opioid overdose reversal drugs. Favorable.
Recognize the Vice Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 411 requires the Maryland Department of Health to submit a report to the Senate Finance Committee and the House and Health Government Operations Committee by December 1st each year from 2024 through 2026 on number 1, current opioid overdose reversal drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and number 2, whether the department has added each current FDA-approved opioid overdose reversal drug to a standing order, and if not, the reason why. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact, and I move the adoption of favorable committee report.
Adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 411 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 757, Delegate R. Lewis, State Board of Physicians, Supervised Medical Graduates, and Cardiovascular Invasive Specialists, Bridge to Medical Residency Act. Favorable.
Recognizing the Senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
House Bill 757 authorizes a supervised medical graduate or an individual who has a degree of Doctorate of Medicine or Doctorate of Osteopathy and has passed parts of 1 and 2 of the United States Medical Licensing Examination to be able to perform delegated duties in accordance with regulations adopted by the Board of Physicians under direct supervision by a delegating physician. An individual may not practice as a supervised medical graduate for more than 2 years. The bill also repeals the termination date of provisions authorizing a licensed physician to delegate duties to a registered cardiovascular invasive specialist. There are no amendments. There's no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 757 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 822, Delegate Cullison, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, employed with individuals with disabilities, favorable.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 822 is similar to Senate Bill 790, which passed the Senate unanimously earlier this session. The bill repeals existing provisions regarding the Medicaid Employed Person with Disabilities Program, or EID program, and instead requires the Department of Health to provide services for individuals under the EID program in a specified manner. The bill also requires MDH to study the fiscal and operational impact of implementing an employed person with disabilities program that serves individuals age 65 and older, and establishing a premium contribution for EID program services that is based on an applicant's earned and unearned income. There are no amendments, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 822 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. That does it for that one. Let's go to report number 53. Clerk will read the
Mr.
first
President,
bill.
before we
yes.
do, really quickly between calendars.
Sorry, may I proceed?
Thank you. Just a quick introduction. I see that Eric Smothers, the president of the Maryland State Firefighters, is here in the gallery. Just thought we might want to greet him.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you for your service. All right, Madam Clerk, if we could go to the first bill.
House Bill 959, Delegate Bhandari, Health Occupation Certified Dialysis Technicians, Continuing Education Requirement, favorable.
Recognized senator from the 28th District is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 959 alters the continuing education requirement for certified dialysis technicians renewing their certification. It requires 3 hours of continuing education rather than a 3-hour continuing education course. There are no committee amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There is no opposition at the committee hearing. Therefore, I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 959 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1053, Delegate Kaiser, State Board of Nursing, Executive Director Qualifications, favorable.
Recognized the senator from Montgomery County is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 1053 removes the requirement that the executive director of the State Board of Nursing must be a registered nurse with a minimum of a master's degree in nursing or the equivalent. The bill takes effect following the termination of provisions under current law, giving the Secretary of Health authority over the infrastructure operations of the board until June 30, 2025. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1053 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1078, Delegate Woods, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Remote Ultrasound Procedures and Remote Fetal Non-Stress Tests, favorable.
Recognized the senator from District 12 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1078 requires Medicaid to provide remote ultrasound procedures and remote fetal non-stress tests using current procedural terminology codes if, number one, the patient is in a residence or a location other than the office of the patient's provider, and number two, the provider follows the same standard of care that the provider would follow when providing services on site. Medicaid must provide reimbursement for a remote fetal non-stress test in the same manner as an on-site fetal non-stress test, and must issue guidance for providers to implement the bill. There are no amendments. There's no fiscal impact. There is no opposition. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1078 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1105, Delegate Woods, Advanced Practice Registered Nurses Certification Requirements and Exceptions, favorable.
Recognized the senator from the 33rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1105 requires an individual to be certified as an Advanced Practice Registered Nurse, APRN, before practicing Advanced Practice Registered Nursing in the state. The requirement does not apply to a student enrolled in a graduate level APRN program or an individual permitted to practice as an APRN under the rules and regulations adopted by the Board of Nursing. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1105 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1451, Delegate Embry, the Jumpstart Every Artist and really emphasizing monetary support, yielding more artwork group, established, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 40th District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1451 as amended is identical to Senate Bill 764, which passed the Senate unanimously earlier this session. The bill establishes the Arts Incubator Work Group to study how arts and cultural institutions can support local artists. The Maryland State Arts Council must provide staff for the work group. The work group must submit a preliminary report and a final report on its recommendations to the governor and the General Assembly by October 1st, 2024 and October 1st, 2025, respectively. And the recommendation must include any necessary budget, facilities, or in-kind services that are needed or could be used to support local artists. The bill takes effect July 1st, 2024 and terminates on December 31st, 2025. Amendment number 1 alters the title and purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 alters the name of the work group and the membership of the work group, aligning them with the Senate bill. There's no fiscal impact. I move the amendments in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1451 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Let's go to the committee, stay with finance, report number 54. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 68, Delegate Stein, Continuing Care Retirement Committees, Transparency, Grievances, and Unit Reoccupancy, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognize the senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
House Bill 68, as amended, is the same as Senate Bill 76, which we just went through a couple minutes ago. So there are a few committee amendments. The amendments are clarifying. Move the adoption of the amendment in the favorable committee report.
All right. Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment and the the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 68 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 183, Chair Appropriations, Human Services Food Supplement Program and Human Services Career Scholarships, alterations, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 28th as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 183 is a departmental bill that makes technical and clarifying changes to the Summer Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for Children. The bill removes a requirement that supplemental funds be added to a household account. It alters a date for counties to submit program applications, also alters information submission requirements, and alters the dates that information must be provided to participating counties. Summer SNAP funding may be used to provide funds to a county to supplement benefits and offset administrative costs of a federal program. The bill also makes technical and clarifying changes to the pilot program for Human Services Career Scholarship, and mandated appropriation language is eliminated. There are no amendments. I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 183 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 272, Delegate Grammer, Cannabis Licensing or Registration, Use of Straw Ownership, Prohibition, favorable.
Oh, yes, Chair, recognize Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 272 prohibits a person from applying for or holding a cannabis license or registration if the ownership interest in the license or registration is nominal or without the benefits and risk of genuine ownership or control. So this is really protecting our minority businesses so they have the opportunity to own and operate one of these dispensaries. The Maryland Cannabis Administration must deny an application for a cannabis license or registration or revoke a cannabis license or registration if the applicant, licensee, or registrant is convicted of violating or determined by the MCA to be in violation of the bill's prohibition. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 272 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 461, Delegate Martinez, Health State Advisory Council on Quality of Life at the End of Life, renaming, favorable.
Recognizing the Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this important bill renames the State Advisory Council on Quality Care at the End of Life to the State Advisory Council on Serious Illness Care. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 461 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 602, the Speaker, Employment Discrimination, Sexual Orientation, favorable.
Recognize the Senator from the 33rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 602 expands the state's equal pay for equal work law by prohibiting employment discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, in addition to existing protections based on sex and gender identity. The protections will apply to payment of different wages based on sexual orientation and providing less favorable employment opportunities based on sexual orientation. Differing wages are allowed based on non-discriminatory seniority or merit systems. The bill addresses a recent Maryland Supreme Court case that specifically referenced the absence of sexual orientation in the requirements and prohibitions under the state equal pay for equal work law. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 602 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 609, Delegate Solomon, Education, Public Libraries, Collective Bargaining, and Library Workers Empowerment Act, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize the Senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 609, as amended, is the same as Senate Bill 591, which we just discussed a few minutes ago. This bill, in summary, grants collective bargaining rights to designated employees of public libraries in Maryland. There is an amendment. The amendment is clarifying and conforms the bill to Senate Bill 591. Move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the Senator from the 35th District.
Mr. President, could we also special order this till tomorrow?
Senator's moved to special order the bill till tomorrow. Any objections? Without objection, the bill will be special ordered at the appropriate time tomorrow. All right. Let's go with report number 55. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 676, Delegate M. Morgan, Right to Try Act, Individualized Investigational Treatments, favorable.
Recognizing the minority whip as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 676 modifies the Right to Try Act in Maryland, repealing the definition of investigational drug, biological product, or device, and replaces references to that term with the term individualized investigational treatment and adds additional related definitions. Changes are made throughout the entire Act to conform with the different definitions. Carriers or government agencies may provide coverage for the cost of an individualized investigational treatment or related service. However, a hospital or another healthcare facility is not required to provide these new or additional services unless they approve it themselves. There are no amendments by the committee, and I would move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 676 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 723, the Speaker, Office of the Attorney General, Rights of Residents of Healthcare Facilities, Injunctive Relief, favorable.
Recognize the Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 723 authorizes the Attorney General to prevent irreparable harm to residents of a nursing home and to seek conjunctive relief on behalf of the state on the basis of an imminent or ongoing violation of a specified basic right of residents of a nursing home or assisted living program. The Attorney General may not duplicate corrective action imposed by the Maryland Department of Health for the same violation. The bill also alters the definition of resident bill of rights for residents of assisted living program facilities. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 723 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 805, Delegate Wilson, Cannabis, licensee locations, restrictions favorable with 3 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 805, as amended, is similar to Senate Bill 537 as it passed the Senate. The bill makes various changes related to local zoning with respect to cannabis licenses by clarifying existing provisions and adding additional limitations regarding the location of licensed dispensaries. There are 3 amendments. They conform the bill to the Senate bill and continue the authorization for growers to engage in outdoor cannabis cultivation, which existed before the legalized sale of adult-use cannabis. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 805 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 871, Delegate Jackson, business regulation, detached catalytic converters, record keeping requirements favorable.
Recognizing the vice chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 871 requires a licensed automotive dismantler, scrap metal processor, or junk dealer that acquires all or part of a detached catalytic converter to record and keep in the person's records the vehicle identification number of the vehicle from which the catalytic converter was obtained. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
My mechanic specifically asked for something about this. He was saying it's this huge issue, so looks like we're moving something. All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 871 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 969, Delegate Bartlett, death certificates, cause or manner of death determinations, requirements after change or correction, favorable.
Recognizing chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 969 establishes a process if the cause or manner of death on a death certificate is amended or corrected by the medical examiner. If a death certificate is amended or corrected to be undetermined or homicide, the medical examiner must notify the appropriate state's attorney and local law enforcement agency. The medical examiner must also request that the Secretary of Health send out a new certified death certificate. The assistant state's attorney must meet a family member regarding a request that the office pursue an investigation into the circumstances of the victim's death. A law enforcement agency, upon notification, must reopen or reinvestigate an investigation involving the death of a victim and keep the case open for at least 20 years. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 969 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. On to report number 56. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 253, Chair, Economic Matters Committee, Cannabis Reform Alterations, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 253 is an emergency bill that alters provisions of law that govern the cannabis industry in the state. The bill mostly corrects references and makes adjustments in response to matters that have arisen since establishment of the industry. The bill clarifies the meaning of cannabis, resulting in the registration of cannabis nurseries, codifies existing practices, repeals requirements for the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, which are now handled by the Maryland Cannabis Administration, alters the membership of the Advisory Board on Medical and Adult Use Cannabis, authorizes the administration to issue penalties, alters provisions relating to cannabis processors, authorizes temporary cannabis agent registration, authorizes the use of logos, and makes other technical, clarifying, and conforming changes. In addition, the bill requires the Office of Social Equity to study the effects if the federal government changes the schedule of cannabis from a level 1 to level 3 drug and extends for an additional year the home delivery of medical cannabis and the ability of existing growers to expand their canopy. The amendment alters background check requirements to mirror current practice. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 253 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 465, Delegate Boafo, Workplace Fraud and Prevailing Wage Violations, Civil Penalty and Referrals, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 465 is similar to Senate Bill 436, which passed the Senate. The bill increases the maximum civil penalty to $10,000 for each employee that an employer is found to have knowingly failed to properly classify under the Workplace Fraud Act. The bill also requires a Commissioner of Labor and Industry, if an employer is found to have knowingly failed to properly classify an employee, or if a contractor or subcontractor knowingly violated the state prevailing wage law, to refer to various state and federal entities any complaint that alleges a violation of specified tax withholding and tax fraud laws. The amendments are technical and increase the civil penalty for multiple violations of the Workplace Fraud Act. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 465 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1116, Delegate Harrison, Business Regulation, Restaurants or Trades, Licensing Requirement, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 19th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 1116, as amended, alters the exemption for a licensed restaurant from the requirement to obtain a trader's license if the restaurant generates 10% or less of its annual sales from non-food items. The amendment clarifies the existing exemption for a restaurant. It passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1116 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1229, Delegate A. Jones, Public Health, Kratom, Consumer Protection Act, favorable.
I hope we figure out what kratom is. Recognize the senator from the 22nd.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Well, let me just start there. Kratom is a topical tree native to Southeast Asia. Consumption of its leaves produces both stimulant effects and sedative effects and can lead to psychotic symptoms. This bill, Mr. President, requires a retailer that prepares, distributes, sells, or exposes for sale a kratom product to disclose on the product label the factual basis on which the representation is made. The bill also limits the uses of kratom as an ingredient. Retailers are prohibited from distributing, selling, or exposing for sale a kratom product to an individual younger than 21 years old. There are no amendments. There was no opposition in the committee. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Learn something new every day. That's mine. Any discussion of the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1229 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1230, Delegate Pena-Melnick, Public Health, Tianeptine, Consumer Protection Act, favorable.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1230 prohibits the retail sale of a tianeptine product. Violators of the ban may be guilty of a misdemeanor and subject to a fine of up to $5,000 and or imprisonment for up to 90 days. Retailers may also be liable for civil damages sustained by an individual resulting from the violation. Tianeptine, according to the FDA, is an unapproved drug in the U.S., although other countries have approved tianeptine to treat depression and anxiety, and some people have turned to tianeptine as an opioid alternative or self-treating anxiety or depression. Tianeptine, however, is not an opioid, and if there is an overdose, naloxone will not work. There are no amendments, and there was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none.
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you. Would the floor leader yield?
I think I moved a little bit too quickly. I think we were on the amended report. On the amended report. Is that Senator's question on the report?
Nope.
On the bill?
Yes.
Is there an amendment?
Possibly.
Okay.
So let's have it on the
report.
On the report, please.
For the sub, yes, please. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a quick question. So thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for pronouncing it because I've never heard of this. So I just did a quick search, and the FDA's website has tianeptine products linked to serious harm, overdoses, and death. And I just wondered, since it passed the House Committee unanimously, the House of Delegates unanimously, and the Finance Committee unanimously, I just wonder whether there's any wisdom or whether there was any consideration of making this an emergency bill rather than going into effect October 1st. As you said, naloxone can't save lives. The FDA has not approved of it, and yet it's available at gas stations and elsewhere. I wonder whether there's any wisdom to moving it faster. Yeah, that's fine.
We can do it on the House bill on third reader, and that makes perfectly good sense.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we are on the amended report. Any further discussion of the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the amended report is adopted, and House Bill 1230 will be passed for third reading, in which we may have an amendment on third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1402, Montgomery County Delegation, Montgomery County State's Attorney Office Personnel, Application of County Personnel Laws and Collective Bargaining, favorable.
Recognize the Senator from the 19th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this local bill establishes the right of non-probationary employees of the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, including non-supervisory assistant state's attorneys, to organize and bargain collectively. In accordance with the provisions of the Montgomery County Code, there are no amendments. The bill is supported by the Montgomery County Senate delegation. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1402 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Sticking with finance. Some busy committee council, lots of floor reports here. Report number 57, clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 22, Delegate Ruth, Agricultural Pollinator Habitat Plan Requirements to State Highway Administration, favorable.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 22 is identical to Senate Bill 178, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill requires the State Highway Administration's Pollinator Habitat Plan to include certain policies and procedures related to pollinator habitat areas along the state highways. Specifically, there must be policies and procedures to encourage the use of pollinator-friendly native plants along state highways, to develop and maintain pollinator habitat areas along state highways to the extent feasible and in accordance with the relevant specified safety and standards, for educating and communicating with the public about pollinator habitats along state highway. There are no amendments, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Do we see that there's a huge glut of bees? The bees are back in full swing. We don't know why, maybe, but the bees are back. All right. On the report, any discussion? Oh, yes, here, Senator from District 7. Maybe you could enlighten us.
No, not enlighten you, but I'm just kind of looking at this bill. So we're going to put pollinating plants along the highway, which I support, but you're putting a lot of bees in the path of oncoming cars. There's going to be a lot of windshields that are going to get hit. Is there a setback requirement on this, or?
No, not a setback, but I think maybe we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. no.
Okay, I mean, I'm just.
No, I mean,
I know what we're trying to do.
only-
I support it. I look at. I'm just kind of thinking of, going
Yeah,
down
but-
83.
but I only hope that we
Knocking
have
bugs
that
all over the
many
windshield.
feet. I really do, and I'm not being smart, but, well, I am very smart, but.
Hey, you are.
Yeah.
You got that hybrid vehicle you drive.
Yeah.
Sure, 22 miles.
Hey.
You get AA batteries in that thing.
No, but, and I
A moment of zen
appreciate
here.
that, but I can look into it if you would like me to.
It's just.
But I just don't want to lose the bill.
No, I don't want to lose it
Okay.
either. Ironically, in another past life, when I had a feed store, I sold a lot of grass seed stuff to the state for planting in the medians and everything. And absolutely, we need to take care of the bees, but it's just kind of like.
But I only
putting them
hope
in
for that
on death's
because
door.
when I was very young and walking through the clover,
Only a couple
I would
years
get
ago.
stung. Yeah, only a couple of years ago, but I would get stung all the time. But when I walk through the grass now, there are no bees hanging around, and I know several people that raise bees, whatever that's called.
Beekeeper?
Beekeeper, but there's a word for it. We have one here in the Senate, but they say the bees die all the time. I mean, they have a hard time with the bees, and we need the bees for the honey. And
The honey, but
other
it's
things.
it's the pollination of other plants. Without bees, you're not going to pollinate. So I understand. I don't want to take up time. I just, again,
okay.
we're
Well,
putting
and I
these
appreciate-
plants along the highway, putting the bees in the
And
path that oncoming
if-
cars.
If the problem
All right.
comes for that, I'm sure the state highways will let us know because they are very involved in this project. Okay, thank you.
All right. On the favorable report, any further discussion? If not, any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 22 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Maybe an insect crossing along the highways? All right. Clerk, will read the next bill.
Mr. President, that could be a bill next year I see coming.
Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 36, Chair Economic Matters Committee, Insurance Protections After Loss or Damage to Property, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 36 is a departmental bill addressing public adjusters. And the bill establishes limitation on solicitation by public adjusters and other consumer protections. This is similar to a Senate bill that passed earlier, but the House struck a certain limitation on solicitation after a loss and extend the period from which an insured has a right to rescind or cancel a public adjuster contract. The House also altered the time period with which notice of entry into a contract must be provided. The Senate amended the House bill to reduce the contract rescission period from 15 days to 10 business days. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Chair moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 36 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 622, Delegate Healy, Consumer Reporting Agencies, Records of Criminal Proceedings, Prohibition, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 22nd District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill prohibits a consumer reporting agency from including in a consumer report any record of a criminal proceeding concerning the consumer in which the consumer was falsely accused, acquitted, or exonerated, in which a null was entered as to a charge concerning the consumer or that did not result in a guilty verdict for the consumer. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 622 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 896, Delegate Stewart, Consumer Protection, Retail Sales of Gift Cards, Gift Card Scams, Prevention Act of 2024, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 19th District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 896 is similar to Senate Bill 760, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill establishes consumer protections relating to the retail sale of gift cards. Amendment 1 strikes language that would have allowed the sale of gift cards with certain packaging that does not concealed codes or activation data. Amendment 2 clarifies an enforcement provision so that it prohibits an action for damages for a violation, authorizing the Consumer Protection Division to issue a notice of violation to allow an alleged violator to cure a violation. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 896 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 932, Delegate Cullison, Health Insurance Utilization Review revisions favorable with 1 amendment.
Utilization reviews. Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 22 is identical to Senate Bill 178, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill requires the State Highway Administration. I got the wrong bill. We're talking about bees again. What? Wait a minute. It's in the wrong thing here. Okay, here it is. I got it.
Mr. President?
Yes, recognize the senator from
I
Montgomery County.
apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
What purpose does Senator rise?
I was just going to recognize guests in the gallery.
While we're, please, Senator may proceed.
Okay, I think we have students from Sienna School here today. If they're here, we welcome them. If not, we welcome them when they come back.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you to the Sienna School. I don't think, do we have them? Well, they've left us, but thank you, Senator. Thank you. Yes.
Okay,
Vice Chair.
thank you. Apologize for the delay. House Bill 932 is similar to Senate Bill 791, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill alters and establishes requirements and prohibitions related to health insurance utilization review and prior authorization, the process used by carriers to determine whether a requested health care service is medically necessary. It alters requirements related to internal grievance and adverse decision procedures and establishes requirements on payers and healthcare providers relating to the provisions of patient benefit information. The amendment alters a protection related to prescription drugs and reauthorization requirements so that it includes an immune globulin as defined under certain federal regulations. The amendment also strikes a provision that exempts a provider employed by a group model health maintenance organization from the protection under the bill. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 932 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Let's go to 58. 58. Finance has been busy. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 996, Delegate White Holland, Consumer Protection, Consumer Council, name change favorable.
Recognizing 28th District as the floor leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 996 renamed the Consumer Council in the Division of Consumer Protection in the Office of the Attorney General, and the new name will be Consumer Protection Commission. If there are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, there is no opposition at a committee hearing, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments or any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 996 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1199, Delegate Edison, Transportation Mobility Link Paratransit Service Improvement Study, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from District 40 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1199 is similar to Senate Bill 891, which been Earlier this session, the bill requires the Maryland Transportation Institute at the University of Maryland to conduct a study to identify methods to improve the Maryland Transit Administration Americans with Disability Act Mobile Link Paratransit Service. Amendment number 1 makes a change to the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 strikes a requirement added by the House that the Maryland Department of Transportation incorporate the findings and recommendations of the study into the 2050 Maryland Transportation Plan. I move the amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Sorry, I'm sorry. Very serious bill. On the 2 amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Goodness. Okay, sorry. Long day. Any objections to the 2 committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1199 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1333, Delegate Pena-Melnick, Public Health, Maryland Commission on Health Equity and Commission on Public Health, revisions favorable.
All right, recognize the Senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1333 requires the Maryland Commission on Health Equity, using a health equity framework, to develop and monitor a statewide health equity plan as required by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation under any agreement entered into between the state and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Commission must coordinate with the Maryland Department of Health and the Health Services Cost Review Commission when establishing an advisory committee. The bill also alters the leadership structure, purpose, duties, and membership of the Commission. In addition, the bill alters reporting requirements for and extends the termination date of the Commission on Public Health. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, there is no opposition. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1333 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1337, Delegate Woods, Health Insurance Appeals and Grievance Process Reporting Requirements favorable.
Recognize the Senator from the 22nd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill expands the required contents for the quarterly report each health insurance carrier must submit to the Insurance Commission regarding appeals and grievances. There are no amendments. There was no opposition in the committee. I move the adoption of the favorable report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1337 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1521, Chair, Health and Government Operations, Maryland Children's Health Program Eligibility and Administration.
Recognizing Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1521 is an emergency departmental bill. Eliminates the collection of premiums for individuals enrolled in the premium program of the Maryland Children's Health Program. The bill also repeals obsolete provisions in the insurance article relating to the Maryland Children's Health Program. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1521 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Last one of finance, not of the day, just of finance. Let's go to report number 59. Clerk, read the first bill.
House Bill 806, Delegate Kerr, Physician Assistant Revisions, Physician Assistant Modernization Program, Act of 2024, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 806 requires the physician assistant to have a collaboration agreement. We talked about this earlier with the Senate bill, and it's now been amended. House Bill 806 has been amended to be identical to the Senate bill with 1 technical amendment. There's no physical impact. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 806 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1497, Delegate Pena-Melnick, State Board of Massage Therapy Examiner, Scope of Practice, Reinstatement, and Examination by Healthcare Providers, favorable.
Recognize the Senator from Carroll County's floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1497 alters the definition of practice of massage therapy or practice massage therapy to include certain techniques. A former licensee seeking to reinstate a license has to submit evidence of having completed a state and national criminal history records check. The State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners must require any applicant whose application the board is reviewing or licensee whose license the board is investigating to submit to an appropriate examination by a healthcare provider which is designated and paid for by the board under certain circumstances. We did not have any amendments in the committee. There is no fiscal impact. I would move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1497 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1498, Delegate Pena Melnick, State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners, aiding or abetting unauthorized practice, prohibition, favorable.
Recognizing the Senator from the Upper Eastern Shore as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1498 prohibits an individual from aiding or abetting the unauthorized practice of massage therapy in the state and establishes related penalties. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1498 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. All right, let's go to budget and tax. Budget and tax. This is report number 27. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 839, Carroll County Delegation, Carroll County Contracts and Purchasing, favorable.
Recognize the senator from St. Mary's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 839 is a local bill and matching cross-file to Senate Bill 437 as passed unanimously by the Senate. Bill raises the contract value threshold from $25,000 to $50,000, above which the county commissioners of Carroll County need to give advance public notice and use competitive bidding to purchase supplies and equipment or contract for public work and improvements. No amendments. Move the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 839 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 907, Delegate Heinbaugh, Garrett County Procurement Bids and Contracts, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from District 2 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 907 is the matching cross-file to Senate Bill 558, which passed unanimously by the Senate. The bill raises the contract value threshold from $25,000 to $50,000, above which the Board of County Commissioners of Garrett County or any employee of Garrett County must solicit bids in one or more newspapers. The bill also exempts contracts for professional services required to be licensed by the state of Maryland from the bid solicitation requirement, but otherwise authorizes such contracts to be solicited by written bids. There are no amendments. Move the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 907 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 928, Washington County Delegation, Washington County Procurement Vehicles, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from District 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 928 is a local bill that authorizes the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County or an employee of Washington County to enter into a contract for the purchase of one or more vehicles without advertising for bids if the amount involved in the contract does not exceed $100,000. There are no amendments. Move the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 928 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1021, Washington County Delegation, Washington County Public Facilities Bonds, favorable.
It is Washington County Day, recognizing the senator from Washington County.
It is indeed, Mr. President. House Bill 1021 authorizes the Washington County Commissioners to issue up to $50 million in general obligation bonds for the acquisition, construction, improvement, or renovation of public buildings, facilities, and public work projects. There are no committee amendments. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objections, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1021 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. All right, that does it for that calendar. Let's go to, we have special order calendar number 71. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 1028, Senator Waldstreicher, Human Relations, Alkaline hydrolysis and natural organic reduction. Question is the adoption of the two committee amendments in the favorable report.
All right, question is on the two committee amendments. Recognizing Senator, the Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a couple of follow-up questions, if I might ask, and then I think we'll be ready.
Will the floor yield to a question? Senator may proceed.
Of course.
Yeah, I did a little bit more investigation on this and talked to some folks, including the bill sponsor, and I talked, which I appreciate. So this is not the last year's bill dealing with this had sort of human composting, and it did not have some of the parameters that this bill had. Some of this stuff, frankly, in my opinion, is a little weird. It's different. It's new. I understand that's a personal opinion. But this is not the human composting of last year, correct?
That's correct. So the sponsors of the bill, along with the Maryland State Funeral Directors Association, the Maryland State Board of Morticians, and the funeral directors, as well as the Office of Cemetery Oversight, worked together to craft the amendments, and any concerns that they've had have been addressed by the amendments.
This bill, as I understand it, it's two types of reduction.
Correct.
That we don't currently allow in the state. My understanding is also there's only a few other states that have done this so far. Is that correct?
There are 20 states that allow for water reduction and 7 that allow for soil.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so there's 20. Okay.
Yes.
And on
I
the
can
water,
read the names if you're.
Well,
if you're interested, read you the list.
I think that's. I had heard about the 8 or 7, so I didn't know that Alkaline was 20. But that's fine. I'm sure that's correct. On hydrolysis, it keeps talking about water. It is true that there are some chemicals involved in this, correct?
95% of it is water, 5% is hydraulic acid to help with the hydrolyzation of the remains of the body.
So the acid helps break the body down.
Correct.
Do they walk me through how this works? Because I think this is important, because this is the kind of bill that can take off with people talking about it online and places, and it can be just like things can be said that we want to be sure it's clear.
Sure.
So someone passes away.
Yes.
Currently, a funeral home comes and takes the body from, say, it's a nursing home or somebody's home or the hospital. This bill doesn't change that process.
Nothing at all. So the body is put into a vessel. The water is heated to 200 to 300 degrees, and the remains are ultimately totally sterilized.
So they just put the. Do they do any, like, you know, when someone's going to be buried and not when someone's when you're going to bury somebody. I was trying to think of the other word I'm looking for. When you're going to bury somebody in a casket, you have a funeral, you're going to embalm the body. Do they do that before they do this process?
Yes. So oftentimes, and it would depend on the family and the loved ones, but the service would be prior to that. They would, rather than putting the body underground, the body would be presented to or placed into a vessel in either the soil reduction or the water reduction processes.
So they wouldn't remove the organs; they would just do it all at one time.
Correct.
Okay. I know when they incinerate, incinerate is not the right word I was looking for. When they cremate, thank you. When they cremate a body, they have to remove. They don't remove organs then either, right? But they do remove pacemakers and metal type objects. So
my understanding of cremation by fire is that they don't, and that's part of the problem. So there is an environmental implication to this. The water cremation, the water reduction, uses 1/10 or less of the carbon of the energy that is used in burning, and there's no emission, there's no smell, and I think the thought was that this is going to end up being very popular for all those reasons. Some families right now are shipping their loved ones out of state in order to avail themselves of this option.
Okay. So it's a green. There's a green energy motivation behind this.
Very
Okay.
much so.
Okay.
So with current cremation, there is a lot of carbon footprint. There is a lot of
Yeah, sure.
sorry,
no,
bad, bad
we've
environmental
all had
implications.
issues in our communities where a community is not real happy about a new incineration thing coming near them or whatever. So I understand.
And the senator from District 43 has been very vocal on this and concerns in the neighborhood. This method creates none of that.
Of the hydrolysis. So once they're done with the hydrolysis, the body then is it's not a body anymore, right? Is it what's produced from that?
20 to 30% more ashes are as a result. It comes out as a fine powder and can be distributed in the same way that that traditional cremation is used. So it can be given to the family that can put it in an urn on the mantle. They can have it made into a stone or some other object, and all those options are exactly the same.
Okay, and what do they do with the water and the acid and the chemicals? Where does that go? It
is drained out, but again, because of the extremely high temperature, 200 to 300 degrees, there is no environmental implication, no bacteria at all.
It just drains like you would drain embalming fluid or anything else if you were involved in a
Correct, but no chemicals, nothing that harms the environment.
Okay, and then on the other one, the natural organic reduction, we're not putting people just in the ground to decompose, right? Obviously, we're not doing that. There's a process here as well that would be its own facility.
Yes, so again, the body is put into a vessel and it is monitored. It takes longer. It takes a few weeks rather than several hours. And it's checked on if there are bones that aren't decomposing. Those are sort of addressed, but it takes a while. But then again, the resulting soil is returned to the family for use as they like. But this is really important. Last year there were questions about what would happen to that kind of soil, and it specifically says in the amendment it can't be sold. It's not going to end up in the compost at a local hardware store. It can't be used to grow food for either humans or animals.
What would it be used for? Just to sit, would it sit on a mantle much like a cremation device? Or?
It would depend on the family, but I think the volume is probably, I'm not sure how many people would put soil on their mantle, but they could.
They could put it out in in a flower bed, like decorative or...
Correct. They can put it on public or private property with permission. So I think the example I gave yesterday was helping to grow a tree in front of the house, and that would be continued presence for your loved one.
But the explanation is helpful because when you said that yesterday, I was able to determine, just because I wasn't clear, there's nothing bad in the soil anymore because it's been all...
That's correct, but there are, just to be clear, if there is a communicable disease, let's say Ebola, that body could not be reduced, have a reduction in soil. That would have to go through the water to make sure that all bacteria is removed, that everything is sterilized. So the default would be on water reduction in those cases.
Is the same company going to be doing both?
That would be up to the provider. One of the interesting things is because there's no fire, because there are no environmental implications, there could be, hypothetically, if all of these stakeholders, and again, the funeral directors, the morticians and stuff, are going to come up with regulations, but locations are going to be less limited because of the lack of environmental implication.
Okay, and then the last question, which I'm not sure you'll be able to answer because this isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse. No, I don't mean that in an offense. I'm not quite sure why this didn't come to finance also, because we do the death industry, and I think some of these questions, I'm sorry to have like a committee hearing here on the floor, but it's important to understand the distinctions here, and there are some things, there's some things that I'm still not real happy with, but I do appreciate the answers, and I think it's just important for us to understand what we're voting on and what's out there. There is more than one company that does this kind of thing, correct?
Yes, this is not a
Committee
redheaded
determined
Eskimo
that?
helping
Yeah.
just one company. And there are funeral directors or morticians who could, once this kind of process is authorized and legalized in the state of Maryland, who could choose to add that to their portfolio or
Right.
even fully shift. In terms of bill assignment, committee assignment, obviously the president's folks do that. I suspect that it was sent to our committee because of the environmental
Right.
piece of it.
Right.
And I will just, in closing, unless you have any other questions, cremation currently is 50% and growing. It is expected to be about 70% in the near future.
Because of costs, I'm sure, is part of that, and also, people changing how they feel about those issues over time. Right.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, on the committee amendments, any further discussion? Recognize the senator from the 20th District on the amendments.
Yeah. Question for the floor leader,
Question from the
Mr.
floor leader.
President.
With floor leader. Senator may proceed.
Yeah, thank you. So, as stated earlier, this bill came through another committee, Finance, last year. And
yes.
And a quick question: with natural organic reduction, with the process that was explained to us, it takes a long time. A lot of organic matter decompose, and I think it was said that hundreds of pounds of organic reduction soil resulted from the natural organic reduction. And so is there a kind of different technique that is approved under this bill where it's only be maybe a few pounds? There
So
seems to be a little disconnect with that.
I think the experts, which are, I assume, not in this body, are going to figure that out and create the parameters. Again, the Maryland State Funeral Directors Association, the Maryland State Board of Morticians, the funeral directors, and the Office of Cemetery Oversight are all going to be collaborating on some of these details. This bill sets the parameters and authorize it so that we can join the other states that already allow it.
Yeah, because if we have hundreds of pounds per reduced body in soil, it'd be hard to kind of move that around. And we have some districts, some areas in the state where things are dumped, and it's not really good. There are problems with that. So I'm just curious as far as the number of pounds of organic matter that will produce from natural organic reduction. What will happen to those?
Really important question. And one of the things that's in this bill that's really clear and that the industry would really be concerned about if anyone wondered, the remains are always treated with respect. Right. The disposal of soil is not going to be willy-nilly and disrespectful. It is still a loved one that needs to be treated carefully and with love.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, question remains on the two committee amendments. Recognize the senator from the 42nd District on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have one question.
Sir,
yes, sir.
What about the acid? How is that disposed of?
So,
that has the remains of the human body in the acid.
It is potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide, and that just speeds up the reduction of the body in the water reduction.
Right.
Because it's heated to 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, it's really hot. And so whatever is in there, the remains are totally sterile, and the chemicals are also
what are they, just flushed down the toilet or something?
basically. I mean, I don't want to say flush down the toilet, but they are. Look at you. Okay. Yes, but they are safely evacuated in whatever system that they've got at that mortician or funeral director's
Well, it
place
strikes
of
me
business.
that if this process ever gains currency, and an awful lot of people are electing this, there's going to be a lot of liquid that people's bodies are put in and that has to be disposed of. And we're talking about a serious sewage problem. Is it going
Water,
to flow
Senator,
into
it's-
our water recycling plants with all these chemicals and human remains in it?
So first off, council has said that it's basic, not acidic. So for whatever that's
Not
worth.
acidic?
It's basic.
What's
It is,
that mean?
again, I will say again, it is potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide. So it's base. It's the opposite of acid. If we remember our pH tests and stuff from junior high school, middle
I think
school
our pages
science.
probably are more up on
I'm
that
seeing,
than I am.
Yes,
I see a
they're-
nodding head over here.
I'm getting some nodding.
So I remember when I was, I guess, a teenager, I took a girl to a drive-in movie, and the movie was The House on Haunted Hill,
Ooh.
and there was a vat of acid in the basement, and people, when they fell into the acid, they were quickly disintegrated.
It's not a good thing.
Is that sort of what this is going to be like? Acid?
No. So again, it's not acid, it's base. So I misspoke if I said acid. So it's 5% of the 100% of the liquid. And because it's super, super heated,
movie?
everything in there is totally sterile.
No.
So you're saying it is safe to flush it down the toilet or put it down the drain?
Correct.
At the end of the day?
Correct.
Okay. And is it possible that could be recycled water?
I don't know the answer
that
to
would
that.
then come out in our spigots?
Well, I can't imagine it going to spigots, but I suspect that all of the implications are going to be considered by these experts, the funeral directors, the cemetery oversight folks. But again, compare water, sterilized water, with smoke and heat and all that. That's from what we're using right now.
Okay. Thank you for your answers to my question.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, on the Senate bill, question remains on the two amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1028 is hereby ordered, printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a special order. Let's go to calendar 72. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1168, Delegate Kaiser, Human Remains, Alkaline Hydrolysis, and Natural Organic Reduction. Question is on the adoption of the favorable report.
All right, questions on the adoption of the favorable report. This is a cross file. Any discussion of the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1168 is hereby ordered passed to third reading. All right, let's go to special order calendar number 73. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 864, Delegate Crosby, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Plans. Question is on the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, question is on the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable report on the amendments. Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the floor leader would yield for a question, please.
Yes, Senator,
sir.
may proceed.
Questions. Thank you very much. It's related specifically to the Empower program and makes updates to that. Could you just again go over what the updates are being made and why they're necessary?
Yeah, so this program was created back in 2008, about 16 years ago. It was an energy efficiency program. It's been super successful. In fact, I would say I've got the data here. For every $1.61 spent, $1.61 in savings for ratepayers. And so the program over the last 15, 16 years has saved ratepayers literally billions of dollars. So the reason for the bill, well, several things. Number one, in 2022, we had the Climate Solutions Act bill, which basically put on par with energy efficiency greenhouse gas reductions as another state priority. And so as a result of the 2022 bill, the current Empower program is not really quite aligned, which is, again, still in its current form an energy efficiency demand response program. This aligns it with the equally important goal, not just energy efficiency, but also having targets for greenhouse gas reduction terminology, targets, and so that's the impetus for the reform. But in the process of reforming it in that regard, we took an opportunity to make some additional changes I would say, that are important long-term for the ratepayers of this state. If I might, Mr. President, if I could just outline a few things that are also changes to the current program. Number one, the Empower program now will 80% of the programs and the benefits of this program will go behind the meter, meaning being directed to the home and to ratepayers. Very significant modification, because we do pay with this through a surcharge, which I'm sure you're going to want to get to, but 80% are going to be behind the meter program. Secondly, in order to address some of the concerns about the current surcharge process, and again, I mentioned this the other day, we took some steps that in the long run will save ratepayers a lot of money. And I'll reference the fact, and I think I mentioned the point yesterday, the Public Service Commission in 2022, appointed by Governor Hogan, basically issued an order and that said, and if I might backtrack, Mr. President, a little bit, we've had a system in place to pay for Empower since 2008, where in effect we have an expense program, but then we're essentially, our ratepayers are paying just a minimum amount. And so this unamortized balance, essentially a credit card balance, has accumulated since 2008 to the tune of about $650 million. So what the Public Service Commission did, the Hogan PSC said, it's time to, and I'm going to borrow a terminology from the President Pro Tem, it's time to rip the Band-Aid off. And as the fiscal note writer points out on fiscal note page 9, yes, there's going to be a short-term bump. We're going to now transition to currently expensing the costs of this program, paying down that credit card debt. Don't let it accumulate forever. And in the long run, as the fiscal note rate points out on page 9, ratepayers of our state will in the long run save a tremendous amount of money. We did that. And then we also elongated the payoff period. The Public Service Commission said pay off this long-term unamortized credit card balance by 2029. They later changed it to 2031. To smooth things out, under this bill, we made it 2032. But maybe the most important significant adjustment, Mr. President, and I think this is super important, currently, under the current Empower program, our utilities are making about 9 to 10% rate of return on that balance, pre-tax, after tax 7%, and we're making a pretty bold adjustment here and saying, you know what, you're getting 10% on that $640 million balance for not achieving anything, for not doing anything that's in compliance with targets. And so what we've done here in this bill is significant. We've adjusted how they get their recovery, their rate of return, and it's going to be down to about 4 to 5%. We had to get some legal guidance from the Attorney General, but that's in the bill. So between elongating the payoff period to 2032, taking that return the utilities are getting right now for doing nothing from 9 to 10% down to 4 to 5%, I think we're doing a lot for the ratepayers of Maryland. And so, you know, to the extent there are some short-term hits, it's a good political talking point, but the bottom line is in the long run, the ratepayers of our state are going to benefit, as is pointed out in the fiscal note. So those are the three major, and one final thing, Mr. President, we passed legislation last year to have the Empower program benefit low-income Marylanders, because one of the problems we have now is those folks pay into the Empower program, but they're not getting that much benefit from the program. And so in this bill, we incorporate some of the legislation from last year, and so we have specific targets as far as how much benefit should be directed and empowered to low-income folks. Again, this is part of the reform effort. It's multifaceted, but it's been a super successful program, and that hopefully answers your sort of broader question.
It certainly does, and I appreciate that response. But it does bring up a few extra questions. So as a ratepayer, and they are obviously, they've been paying in to Empower through the surcharges. That's been accurate. So,
correct.
So now it's mentioned that there's a $640 million credit card debt, essentially, a debt.
That
right?
has accumulated since 2018. So again, just to be clear, the way the system was set up at the outset, I think there was concern about a big hit early on. The Public Service Commission, it was not this legislature, Mr. President, it was the Public Service Commission at that time said, we're going to not require you to currently expense the cost and charge it to ratepayers in the year of the expense, but we'll let you roll it over a 5-year amortization schedule. And so that probably made some sense in 2008. The Public Service Commission at that time did that, but that balance has ballooned to $640 million, and our folks in Maryland are paying on that balance, similar to, again, paying the minimum amount on a credit card. And so, yes, that is basically how it's accumulated, and that's kind of where we are. Yes.
Okay, because I was going to ask who mismanaged this to get to a $640 million debt.
Well, I would say it wasn't the legislature. I would say in 2018, the Public Service Commission, in order to smooth out the impact on ratepayers, but I'll reiterate, over that 15-year period, for every dollar spent in surcharges, we have gotten back $1.61 in rate reduction benefits. And so I think it's, on the long run, was not a bad idea, but the Public Service Commission, not the legislature, came up with this unamortized 5-year process, and that we haven't changed it, and that's where we are right now. So it's time, again, the President Pro Tem in voting session used the term pulling off the Band-Aid, and I think that's absolutely kind of appropriate here.
So ratepayers have been paying a surcharge every month on their bills. And,
correct.
And one of the utility companies has said it's about $8.65 might be it. So
right, and I have the chart here if you want to, it's per, just to be clear, it's per, different rates for different parts of different service territories, and so we have breakouts. We got that during the voting session.
But if we make, if we say it's around that number right now, and they've been paying that monthly surcharge the entire time this program has been in existence, right? So it's not like they weren't that ratepayers weren't paying it, and we've accumulated all the debt from the programs. They've been paying into this, but we still have $640 million in debt?
No, you're missing out. There's apples and oranges. For every dollar in surcharge, the ratepayers have actually, in terms of energy efficiency programs, which is what the program is about, it's actually reduced consumption. So you have to think of it broadly and in macro. In fact, the data we have, and there's actually a report, I think, from 2022, is actually ratepayers have saved in terms of less consumption of electricity to the tune of billions of dollars in our state over that 15 or 16-year period. And so when you say there's still that is as a result of how this mechanism, this cost recovery mechanism, was set up in 2008. It has really nothing to do with ultimately whether it's been beneficial for the state of Maryland and our ratepayers. In fact, the overwhelming evidence is this is one of the most successful energy efficiency programs in the nation during that 15 or 16-year periods in terms of bringing down consumption and saving ratepayers money because they are consuming less energy.
Right. So many people remember this as the light bulb program, right? I mean, that was one of the first things that came out, the easy, low-hanging fruit, that we would change to different style of light bulbs that would use less electricity. They would be available for cheaper prices if you went to buy them.
Maybe
right?
in 2008, it's evolved. Now it's weatherization. You get free audits. You've got, there's a multitude of programs. Yeah. Maybe in 2008 it was about that. Over the 15-year period, it's evolved pretty substantially. Yep.
So under
and appliance upgrades is a big part of this. High energy efficiency appliances, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
So the new reform now focuses more on greenhouse gas reductions, is what you've said, right?
Well, it's now on par. Until now, as a result of the Climate Solutions Act, now we have another state priority, which is greenhouse gas emissions. And so when you look at the bill as it is now, yes, there's a pivot, if you will, to align in power with what we established in this body in 2022 in that piece of legislation.
And then you said that these programs now, 80% of them must come from behind the meter programs.
Will benefit behind the meter, meaning back to this point, appliances, things that will actually save ratepayers money in terms of their energy consumption and bills. So this was a deliberate policy call. I think an important part of the bill that has not been the case until now, until this piece of legislation.
So are you saying then that we haven't done those types of behind-the-meter programs?
We have, but this specifically, we didn't have it written in code that 80% of the programs will now be directed behind the meter. I think that I can't tell you because it was never quantified. There was nothing in law that, as these programs were crafted, that 80% need to be. But I suspect a large percentage were, but it's not in code, and there's no number to sort of, I think, quantify exactly that number.
You also mentioned that there was a rate on return. I think you used $1.61 for every dollar spent. Was that the number?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually some more macro data that says that if you actually look at the lifetime of the appliances, for example, that are in the home as a result of Empower, over that lifetime, that ultimately will save ratepayers $13.5 billion in Maryland over the course of the lifetime of all these things that the Empower program has paid for, appliances, et cetera, for a spend of about $3 billion. We're going to get $13.5 billion in rate reductions for Maryland ratepayers. But the $1.61 for every dollar spent is a solid number.
Right. So again, from the ratepayer's perspective, if they've been paying into this program every month since 2008, and let's say they've got the new light bulbs, and let's say they have the new appliances, what else out there is something that a ratepayer could look forward to, since they're paying into this, to help them reduce their energy costs?
Yeah, well, there's a tremendous amount of new technology, heat pumps, and high efficiency stoves. I mean, yeah, I'll give you a laundry list of things that didn't exist in '08, but exist now. But there's,
these are, you would, you'd get these types of appliances through rebate programs, or?
Yeah, well, there's different incentives, and by the way, there's federal incentives as well. Different incentives for different component parts, different programs. As I say, this is a fairly broad program, whether it's energy audits, weatherization, appliances, and there's different rebates or incentives for each part of it. It's voluntary. Nobody's, bottom line is, okay, it's not, there's a surcharge.
Right.
There's a surcharge. But to your broader point about they've been paying in, this is all part of a broader desire, whether it's climate change, energy efficiency, and another byproduct, Mr. President, if I have to make, we've talked a lot about grid capacity and more demand on the grid. Well, this is actually all designed in part to, again, reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gas, but also reduce consumption and stress on the grid. So it's another policy.
But again, this is a customer-based, these are customer-based programs, right? So the customer would have to take some type of proactive effort in order to receive the benefits of these programs, right?
That's correct. And I should also add the Public Service Commission is very much involved with this, as are the utilities. Yeah, through the utilities, there's outreach programs. Again, we're trying to achieve a number of policy goals through this program. Again, greenhouse gas reductions, energy efficiency, reducing stress to the grid, ultimately with this new cost recovery program, after that short-term bump, saving ratepayers money over the long run. So there's a lot of good stuff in this. And which is why, by the way, not only the Public Service Commission supported the bill, the Office of People's Counsel, who I know you know well, whose core function is to protect ratepayers, is entirely 100% in support of this piece of legislation.
Okay. Then some of the information I received is, and you've mentioned this bump in the surcharge that's going to occur probably in 2026. Is that when
right?
It's
so the
expected
way
to occur?
the numbers that the utilities and the Public Service Commission provided to me say that we'll have a bump until 2026, then it will stabilize, and then eventually 2028, 2029, you're going to have a steep decline. So the peak will be in 2026. So again, I'll just say for those folks who want to make a short-term political statement that sounds good about 24 to 26 as we rip off the Band-Aid. I understand it. In the long run, as the fiscal note writer said, and as the testimony is, and the People's Council testimony, everybody else, this is something that the Hogan PSC said we need to do for the purposes of saving our Maryland ratepayers money in the long run. But yes, the bump will be in peak 2026, stabilize, and then it'll start to decline. Yeah, until 2031, and then the balance will be paid off in 2032. At the latest 2032, that unamortized $50 million balance will be gone, and then we'll move to a system at that point where whatever is expended on the Empower program, that will be in that year the surcharge. Right now, it's a combination of that plus that rate of return, 9 to 10%. Now it'll be 4 to 5%. So hopefully that is answering your question.
I was just going to say, so the legislation then is very specific that we can assure the ratepayers that while they need to pay 5 years for this, I'll say mismanagement. I don't know what else there is to say if you've got, $640 million worth of debt that needs to be paid off. Something was mismanaged, or we created a policy that allowed this to happen. But either way, there's 5 years of which the ratepayers' monthly surcharge is projected to go up almost potentially 3 or 4 times, is what I'm understanding.
Repeat that. The vice chair was giving me some information.
I said, as what we're looking at right now, the ratepayers are now in the position that they have to pay the debt that's occurred over the initial years of this program. And it's been brought out to say it's about 5 years of a much higher rate. Now,
when you say much higher, I don't know, I think we go from, like you say, $8 to $10 to $20. So for the average residential ratepayer is basically, I think, what we're talking about. And then it'll stabilize. And again, eventually in 2031, it'll go off of a cliff and be much lower, but okay.
But even $8 to $20 is substantially different, especially when you're talking about, this doesn't, take in effect the amount of usage or the low and moderate income customers. I mean, this is just across the board. Everybody has to pay down this $640 million debt, right?
Okay, well, the alternative, of course, is the credit card model, that if you're advocating that we do nothing and we continue to insist that Maryland ratepayers pay the minimum on the credit card, that's, a policy call or an argument that I don't think makes any financial sense for our state. But if that's the argument you're making, what I am saying is pretty simply that, yes, from $10 to $20 for a few years to get us to a new model where we pay off the debt. Currently, we're paying the minimum on the credit card, and that makes no sense to anybody who has a credit card in their home, and it's no different than the personal finance situation.
I might be advocating that I think this program might be suspect at best. That it has gone on for a number of years. We've had to make extensions. The reason we've made extensions is because we were falling behind and paying for everything. Or the ratepayers be able to make up for this. And now, as you said, it's come time to pay the debt off of this, and a decision is being made that says, okay, we're going to increase the monthly surcharge on ratepayers 3 to 4 times for 5 years. They're going to have to pay it off, and then we'll bring it back down. But at the same time, why would the ratepayers think that this is going to be managed any differently, that they're not going to be having to pay off this debt the way that they have in the next 5 years?
One other thing I should have also mentioned, we put an amendment on the bill in the committee, which I think is super important, Mr. President. There's a transparency part. We actually will now have in the bill, and you'll see it if you look at the reprint, I think it's on page 8, amendment from the senator from District 9 put in. We're actually going to disclose to the ratepayers on their bill that part of this is actually going to pay off that debt. And so we're going to come clean with the ratepayers here, that here's your charge, but there's a portion of this is going to reduce this massive debt. I mean, how it's going to be worded will be left up to the Public Service Commission, but I understand where you're coming from. I will just reiterate the point. This has been a super successful program. There is a finance situation here that we need to deal with finally, as was the case again with the order from the Public Service Commission appointed by Governor Hogan said. We're codifying to some extent what he said, or that group, that commission of regulators said needed to be done. But I don't think we're going to have to agree to disagree on sort of the program itself and where it's going and where it's been.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
I appreciate the conversation and the answers to my questions, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, again, I think this is a program that some will say has been successful. Some will say that there's been a rate of return that is valuable enough to warrant ratepayers paying this monthly surcharge. But I assure you, in 2 years, there's going to be complaints about this. This is a line item on each ratepayer's electricity bill. They will see this number, and when their rates go up in January in 2026, they'll see the difference between what they paid last year, not in their energy costs, not in taxes, but on this surcharge. And when we get here, there will be questions on why this is going up. And we're going to have to respond to them that somebody somewhere mismanaged a program that may have started off as a good idea in 2008, but I think we've gone through enough of the easy, more energy efficient programs already, and now we're, in a sense, reaching for straws to try to find new programs, and we've changed the way that we're going to look at this now. Now we're going to come back to the ratepayers and say, well, we've always talked about energy efficiency and conservation. And ratepayers can buy into that because they say, if I use less, then my electricity bills will be down. But now we're going to say, well, we've done all that. We've figured out the best ways to conserve energy, but now you're going to be responsible for your reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And by the way, you're going to pay 4 times more each month in order for the state of Maryland to put programs together that are going to allow you to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And I think there's going to be an issue come January 2026. We'll all be here, hopefully. It's an election year. My colleague mentioned that, there's been comments about that already, so I don't need to mention those. But there will be questions that arise by then. So my hope is, I understand obviously this bill is going to go forward, but that we do take a better look at this program. And we do really have to now start deciding, is this in the best interest of ratepayers? Is $30 a month on your electric bill worth something, worth this type of program that, again, has been suspect and hasn't worked well in the past? So I know it's on second reader right now, and I will, again, I am in opposition of this bill until I think we can put some more guardrails in place that are going to protect the ratepayers, because they're obviously going to get a very big hit. The news will come out before they get the bills. They'll be waiting to see it, and unfortunately, this body is going to be responsible for delivering higher electricity bills to our constituents.
All right, thank you, Senator. On the 2 committee amendments, any further discussion? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 864 is hereby ordered passed for 3rd reading. All right, Senators, we're going to take up, if we could do a quorum call, Madam Secretary, if we could ring the bells.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 41 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. All right, Senators, we are going to take up some of the 3rd reading calendars that are either Senate bills or have been amended in the Senate, so they'll take a little bit more time, and then we're going to call it a day there. So it's about, I don't know, 4 or 5 calendars. And we will not come back this afternoon. We're going to leave time for committees to really have session time in committee. And tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, kind of etch out those double sessions, and we'll see where we are. Keep that Saturday still. There's a lot left, but we'll get through the most that we can. So we're going to start with Senate bills. This is third reading calendar number 83. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 404, Senator Smith, Criminal Law Firearms Exception to Trespass Prohibition.
Senate Bill 404 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 404, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 432, Senator Kagan, Public School Active Shooter Safety Drills or Trainings Requirements.
Senate Bill 432 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 432, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 471, the President, Criminal Procedure Victim Compensation Alterations, Victim Compensation Reform Act of 2024.
Senate Bill 471 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 471, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 570, Senator Hester, Public Utilities, Thermal Energy Network Systems, Authorization and Establishment Working for Accessible Heat, Renewable Maryland Thermal Heat Warmth Act.
Senate Bill 570 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 570, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 682, Senator Hester, Electric Companies Regional Transmission Organizations Report, Utility Transparency and Accountability Act.
Senate Bill 682 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 682, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 922, Senator Mouts, Natural Resources, Fisheries, Oyster Management.
Senate Bill 922 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 922, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 956, Senator Hester, Environment, Water Pollution Control, Protecting State Waters from PFAS Pollution, Protecting State Waters Act from PFAS Pollution Act.
Senate Bill 956 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 956, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, let's go to third reading calendar number 1818. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill number 2, Delegate Boyce, Property Taxes, Authority of Counties to establish a subclass and set a special rate for vacant and abandoned property.
House Bill 2 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 2, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 54, Delegate Atterbury, Property Tax, Transfer to Heir or Legatee Payment Plans.
House Bill 54 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 54, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 63, Delegate Pruski, Property Tax Credit for Dwelling House of Disabled Veterans Alterations.
House Bill 63 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 63, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 153, Delegate Rosenberg, medical records fees, attorneys representing patients.
House Bill 153 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 153, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 165, Delegate J. Lewis, local government annual audit reporting requirements, alterations.
House Bill 165 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 165, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 228, Chair, Environment and Transportation Committee, Natural Resources, Maryland State Parks, Funds and Plan, alterations.
House Bill 228 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 228, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 376, Prince George's County Delegation Study on the feasibility of relocating the Prince George's County Public School System headquarters.
House Bill 376 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 376, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 486, Delegate Fair, residential property sales, contract disclosure, Superfund sites.
Mr. President.
Oh, yes.
I have an
Recognized
amendment.
senator from 4th District has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment involves two slight amendments. The first one strikes out entirely the JPR amendment that was offered in committee, and it replaces that amendment with inserting the language of after and on line 2, page 3, the word across, and allows for simpler language for those that are seeking the MPL locations to be found without having the URL as a part of the bill. And with that, I would move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Any objections from the floor? It appears not. Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments? If not, House Bill 486 is again before us on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 486, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1162, Delegate Rogers, 911 Specialist Recruitment and Retention Work Group.
House Bill 1162 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1162, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Let's go to calendar number 2727. Again, these are amended bills that will need a concurrence. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 105, Delegate Atterbury, Drunk Driving Offenses Ignition Interlock System Program.
House Bill 105 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 105, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 732, Baltimore City Delegation, Baltimore City Control Over Powers of Police Commissioner.
House Bill 732 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 732, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 761, Montgomery County Delegation, Montgomery County School Bus Monitoring Cameras, Distribution of Fines.
House Bill 761 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 761, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 832, Delegate Stewart, General Provisions, Damages or Losses, Definition.
House Bill 832 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 832, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 973, Delegate Valentine, Public Safety, Law Enforcement Agencies, Positive Community Feedback.
House Bill 973 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 973, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1037, Delegate Taylor, Task Force on the Creation of Division of Returning Citizens and Expanding Reentry Services Establishment.
House Bill 1037 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1037, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, let's go to 31, calendar 31, 3-1. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 397, Delegate Charkoudian, Public Utilities, Thermal Energy Network Systems, Authorization and Establishment, Working for Accessibility, Renewable Maryland Thermal Heat, Warmth Act.
House Bill 397 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 397, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 404, Delegate Woods, Public Safety, Wellness Checks, Requirements, Gabriel's Law.
House Bill 404 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 404, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 416, Delegate Solomon, Public Schools, Active Shooter Safety Drills or Trainings Requirements.
House Bill 416 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 416, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 505, Delegate Charkoudian, Electric Companies Regional Transmission Organizations Membership and Report Utility Transparency and Accountability Act.
House Bill 505 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 40 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 505, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1153, Delegate Love, Environment, Water Pollution Control, Protecting State Waters from PFAS Pollution, Protecting State Waters from PFAS Pollution Act.
House Bill 1153 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1153, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1296, Delegate Wilson, Electricity Offshore Wind Projects Alterations.
House Bill 1296 is on third reading for final passage. Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to special order this until tomorrow, the appropriate time.
The floor leader.
Is it for purposes of an amendment, or but at this point, I want some rationale. I don't want to just sort of just unilaterally.
Thank you.
just-
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there an,
The
I don't mean to press you with a
No,
difficult question. but-
Not at all. I just wanted to see how many different things I wanted to mention. That I don't think everybody wants to hear another 40-minute debate, but maybe they do. It's 1:20, so it's 1:20, and we do have several amendments. So for the
Okay.
sake of time, I would think we should special order until
Okay, that's good. It's a House bill. We're good.
Plenty of time. All right. No objections. Bill will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow. One last order of business is special order calendar number 74. Clerk will read the report.
Executive Nomination Committee Report Number 6. Question is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nomination of nominee number 6?
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think all the issues with the nominee has been settled. Move a favorable
All
committee
right.
report.
Excellent. On the nominee, the question before the Senate is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nomination of the nominee? Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, nominee number 6 is advised and consented to affirmatively by the Senate of Maryland. And with that, I think we have concluded our executive nominations. I just want to say thank you to the chair of executive nominations. Deft leadership throughout the year. We had a great year. Got through smoothly. All right. That does it for now. The desk is as clear as it's going to get. So we are going to have probably a long afternoon. Again, 2 days tomorrow, 2 days Thursday, 2 days or double on Friday. In case anybody's asking, the stuff is unamended of the House, so it's not bills that are not moved. It's just they only need to get one pass through, so they got plenty of time. Let's check in with the chairs on committee meetings. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance will meet at 2:30. We have 2 bills to hear and a pretty long voting list. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Yes, Mr. President, we have actually, since we have 18 bill hearings, a lot of them are sponsor only, so don't get too nervous, members of the EEE, but let's go 2:15 for the 18 bill hearings, and then we'll be voting immediately thereafter. 2:15.
2:15, excellent. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will meet at 2 o'clock for voting. And an announcement to everyone, we have a number of bills in our possession from local bills, and we do not have letters associated with them. So if you want those local bills to move, we need the letters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet today at 2:30 for bill hearings, followed by a voting session.
Excellent, 2:30. No executive noms, anything from rules? No? Any delegations, caucuses? Yes, Prince George's County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to shoot for 4 o'clock today, but we'll be flexible, folks. Prince George's County, 4 o'clock, Neal Conference Room, but be flexible.
That may be optimistic, but we'll try our best on 4 o'clock. We'll see. Yes, Senator from Republican Caucus.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Republican Caucus will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m. in the Senate caucus room.
9 a.m. Excellent. All right. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? All right. If not, let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 3rd at 10 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Have a wonderful and productive day this afternoon. See you tomorrow.